Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and today I've got a fantastic guest. This is someone that you almost certainly know if you live here in the Ponchatoula area, because for the last year plus, he's been leading us in the eye of the storm of this pandemic. It's the Chief Medical Officer of the North Oaks Health System, Dr. Robert Peltier. He is a foremost authority on issues like public health, hospitals. We'll get into his credentials. I couldn't begin to do them justice here, but he's just a great doctor, a fine man, and we're very fortunate to have him as our guest. So with no further ado, Dr. Peltier, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, how's everybody out there?
We're very glad that you made it with us. And folks, I want to say here at the top of the hour, we have the ability to post your comments live here on the show. So if you're watching live and you have a question for the doctor, feel free, or comment. If you just want to tell them how thankful you are that they're serving us during this pandemic and pushing through exhaustion and all the issues that are facing healthcare workers today, feel free to say something nice, ask a question. I'll do my best throughout the show to post your question here on the screen, and the doctor will do his best to answer them. So with that being said, why don't we begin, Doctor, with you just telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Houma. We moved there when I was about 6. I was born in New Orleans. Lived there throughout high school, and then I went to LSU. I did my undergraduate. Actually, we started off in physics, but I quickly realized that physics careers didn't deal with people at all, and I knew that's where I wanted to be. And I changed, and I ended up getting a degree in zoology with a psych minor. And but about 3 years into school, I realized that med school was probably the path I wanted to take. I decided.
What sparked that interest? Do you remember the kind of the moment?
I had thought before I'd gone to college that med school was a good possibility for me, but it wasn't necessarily the career path that I took. When I started deciding what I wanted to do, I realized that that really interested me. All of the biologic sciences that went towards physiology and especially pharmacology and biochemistry made more sense to me than some of the other things. And so I by the junior year, I sat with my counselor and said, I think I want to go to med school and take the MCAT this year, and went ahead and did that, and was lucky enough that year to be accepted. I went to LSU Shreveport. Actually had sort of a choice between LSU Shreveport and the New Orleans. And I realized when I went to interview with both of them, I thought LSU Shreveport would fit me a little bit better. To be honest with you, I thought I'd play a little too much in New Orleans. Down. So,
take it from a guy who made a D in chemistry at Tulane because I played a little too much.
Yeah,
but that was smart thinking, Doctor.
I played plenty in college and still did okay, but med school was a totally different beast. And so I spent 4 years at LSU Shreveport, and your third and your fourth year during medical school, you do rotations in your third year, and you kind of figure out what you like and what you don't like. I realized that the surgical subspecialties, although I liked surgery, my mind was better suited towards sort of internal medicine, emergency medicine, family practice. Some of the internal medicine has all the subspecialties of cardiology and oncology, GI medicine, all of those things. And so I thought I was pretty set on doing emergency medicine. I really enjoyed it. And I actually was in Baton Rouge doing a emergency medicine rotation. And one of the internal medicine residents kind of pulled me aside and said, man, you need to come to our morning report a couple of days. I think you'd be great at medicine. And I went to morning report. It is at OK Long, and was just blown away by the discussions that Dr. George Karam, who's my mentor, was having. Dr. Karam was head of the program.
So what exactly is morning report? This is a discussion you mentioned?
Yeah, morning report happens every day at residency programs where
Okay.
the team that was on the night before, they discuss their admissions. And usually they only get through a couple. We try to limit it to an hour or so, and it becomes an educational discussion. Here's what we found in this patient. Here's what we were concerned about. Here's the chest X-ray. Here's the laboratory. We go through it, and then there's a long discussion. Dr. Karam could take it anywhere, and he knew somehow Dr. Karam had the magic of knowing what everybody else in the room knew, so he knew who to call on to discuss certain topics. And so it just blew me away, and I said, "This is where I want to be." And a couple of days later, I found my way to Dr. Karam's office and asked him, I said, "What does it take to get in this program?"
Sounds like an episode of House, but without all the drama and nonsense.
It was Dr. Karam's not nonsense. His background's ID, but I sat with him for a long time, had discussions because he was a very competitive program. I went to LSU Shreveport, and he was teacher of the year every year in LSU New Orleans, like 7 years running for the internal medicine class. And so he had lots of the New Orleans guys all wanting to do their residency there, which I didn't know coming from LSU Shreveport. But I sat and talked to him, and I was lucky enough to be accepted to the program and spent 3 years there, really learning medicine different than you get even at a lot of the bigger programs, because at OK Long, we didn't have a lot of the subspecialty programs available. So there weren't neurosurgery residents, there weren't renal residents, there weren't cardiology residents. So you better learn it, and you better learn how to do it, and you better learn how to take care of it. So it left you extremely confident when you came out, because you weren't always deferring to another service or an upper level. You had to learn, and you had to be able to take care of those patients. So,
well, and it also sounds like maybe perfect training for the position you have now, right? Where you're running a whole hospital as chief of medicine, and you've got to kind of understand all these angles, and maybe doing those different specialties helped. Is that true?
Never thought of that, but that's absolutely true. I never put two and two together, but certainly we. That experience left a number. Listen, we have a number of people that work in the area. Dr. Dave Oob was one of my upper level residents. He's one of our oncologists in town, and Dr. Maury Drummond here. We had a number of people that all did their residencies at that. Dr. Brig Booth, Dr. Jason Reyna, 2 GI docs. So there's a lot of connections between that program and here in Hammond and North Oaks.
Cool.
Yeah.
So where did you go next? You get into this competitive residency. You mentioned you're there 3 years. What's the next chapter?
Well, I decided that when I looked at all the subspecialties of medicine, I needed the variety. I didn't think I'd be happy just doing cardiology or GI or anything else. Although I enjoyed them all, I realized I liked all of them. And so I went out looking for a job, and looked a lot. And at that time I was in Baton Rouge, so I certainly knew those opportunities there, and then started looking out. I went back to Houma, seeing if I wanted to go back to my hometown. I looked everywhere from Lake Charles over to Slidell, sort of along the southern Louisiana. I knew I wanted to stay close. Well, I shouldn't say that. Tara and I, my wife Tara and I, we actually entertained.
Were you married yet at that time, or
we got married as I was a resident.
Okay.
Yeah. I met her when I was in medical school, and then it came time. I was in love, and I had to do something to say, Tara, I want you to come with me. So we started having discussions before I left med school about marriage and those kind of things. And so we got married quickly after I became a resident, and we
cool.
moved to Baton Rouge. But we were looking around, and we entertained. Actually, we kind of.
And where's Tara from? Was she from the South Louisiana area too?
Gonzales.
Okay.
Yeah. Very similar to my growing up in Houma. Kind of near big cities. Ponchatoula, Hammond is so similar to the Gonzales area, because so similar to the Houma area that you have the benefit of being close enough to Baton Rouge and New Orleans for if you need the city stuff, but you get to live the small town life.
Yeah. I've always loved Houma. One of my first jobs out of law school was for a judge from down there, Judge Stanwood Duvall, and spent a lot of time down there. It's great fishing, great hunting, great people.
Sure. My
Did you?
parents still live in the home I grew up in.
Okay. Did you ever run across either of the Dr. Sangisettis down in Homa back in
No,
the day?
I don't know those guys.
Okay,
You
just
know, I
curious.
mean, I
One of
was
my
18
Yeah, I guess you weren't
when I
walking
left.
down the halls of the hospital back then yet, right?
Yeah. You know, recently I realized a couple of years ago that I had lived here in Ponchatoula longer than anywhere else, and where I used to kind of call when people said, "Where's home?" For the longest time, it was Homa,
Right, right.
but that's not home. Not home for me anymore.
So you and Tara end up settling here in the Ponchatoula area, Hammond area. About when? When did y'all move here?
That was 1998.
Okay.
We had just been. I had spent a few months down in Peru studying tropical medicine, just a side interest of mine, and that was right before I finished residency, and then we set up shop here. You know, interestingly enough, the CEO of the hospital, Michelle Sutton, at that time was doing physician recruitment. She's the person that recruited me here to North Oaks.
Oh, cool. And here we
Yeah,
are all these years later. The two of you are running the shop. That's neat.
yeah,
How,
yeah.
how large
So,
is the hospital now? Can you? I know we're going to get into North Oaks later, but just
mhm.
while we're talking physician recruitment, do you remember how many doctors you had at the hospital when you started compared to today?
Probably in those days, somewhere around 50 or 60. Now I've
Okay.
got 350 plus providers when you
Oh
add
my
all the nurse
goodness.
practitioners and all the different specialties and consultants and those kind of things. So certainly grown. You know, I in 1998 was also the year that we expanded the hospital. We opened up. So I finished my residency and on the 30th of June of 1998, and the hospital opened in May. I actually came to the grand opening,
Oh,
you know,
cool.
where they cut the ribbons and all those kind of
Yeah.
things. Just because I had already signed on, I knew I was coming here to town, and I originally worked with Dr. Laughlin Winkler,
Okay.
Cliff Williams, and Susan Zachariah. And so we were all four in practice together for a little while. And then Dr. Zachariah and I decided we were going to kind of hang our own shingle and get out there. So I did that for about 8 years before Jimmy Cathy at the time approached me. I had been chief of staff and chairman of the medicine department, just practicing internal medicine, sort of that traditional both clinic and hospital practice. And we were at a meeting, and Jimmy said, "Hey, listen, you know, James Nelson, our chief medical officer, has let me know he's going to retire, and I want you to take his place." I said, "Jimmy, no way." I have, you know, listen, I'm flattered. I have interest in that job. I'm just not sure this is the right time in my career to do that. And you know, I go home and I start talking to Tara. I said, "You're never going to believe what Jimmy asked me to do today." And she said, "Rob, you'd be perfect for that job. Are you sure you don't want it?" And
Right.
we sat down and talked for an hour, and we kind of talked through it. And I said, you know, a couple of days later, I went to Jimmy's office. I said, "All right, tell me more about the job."
Well,
And
I knew Mr. Cathy was incredibly persuasive, but it sounds like you've got a wise wife who kind of talked you into a good decision there. And
I can't say anything, but I agree with you on that. Right?
you better.
You know, I don't know if she's watching today, but
Right.
absolutely.
Well, it's one of those things I can relate, with so many career choices, things will pop up that seem like a good idea one day, but then you run the risk that if you don't do it, then, somebody else gets in there and does it forever or does it poorly. And so I know that our community is so much better off because you made the decision to take the mantle of leadership on. So I'm grateful for that. And apparently folks here watching agree. Faith Allen Peterson has popped on here to say how much she wants to thank you for all that you do for our parish. So Faith, thank you for tuning in. She's an alumnus of the show. She did an interview that was very well received about a month or so ago. But sounds like a good decision. So what point in time was that when you became chief of medicine and got into management?
Chief medical officer was 2008. I'm trying to remember if it was 2008, 2009. 2008, April Fool's Day, 2008 was my first day. So I don't know if that was an omen, but we started then, and I spent a couple of months working with Dr. Nelson, who's another mentor of mine. You couldn't ask for a better person than Dr. Nelson. I love when I still see him in town. And
Oh yeah, he's so well liked.
talk
What a great man.
I mean, that guy is salt of the earth.
Yeah, amen. Well, well, tell us about the job, and in a moment here, of course, we're going to get into the unique pressures and issues of today because we're living through times that the world hasn't seen in 100 or more years. But tell us about during normal times what that position entails and what are kind of the challenges and likes, dislikes, etc. But just tell us about that position and your experiences in it, please.
Yeah, well, even though James had been doing it for a little while, in my conversations with Mr. Kathy when we took this on, we kind of talked about what needed to be done at the hospital. What could we do to make things better for the community? And taking that job was a tough decision because I felt like I was helping people through medicine, but I had a chance to help more people by making the hospital better than it was, to start to bring in those quality improvement programs. Great hospital we had, but there's always things we can do. I've got 50 things on my plate, most of which have been pushed back because concentrating on COVID, that we can do to make, the getting in the 99th percentile to the 99th and a half percentile.
Right.
It comes, I put on so many hats as chief medical officer, everything from, working quality, working with the docs, education pieces, working with the community. I spent more time in the past year or two feeling like my job is being a liaison to explain some of the things to happen to the public because, getting those messages out and getting people's questions answered really can get rid of a lot of anxiety, which contributes to their health. And so it's been a good journey because the people I work with here are the best people I know. And I'm talking about not just up here in my office where we have physician services, but throughout the hospital, all the stuff that people do. This is, Michelle says it over and over. People that work here are family. And we act like that here. In fact, I've done the calculations when I do some speeches to residents, and I let them know I spend more waking hours with this family here at North Oaks at home.
Right.
So, people, yes, there's 8 hours.
I can relate. The law, they say, is a jealous mistress. It can be very similar when you're preparing for trial or hearing. So I can relate. Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we take a minute before we get into more North Oaks and pandemic talk and whatnot? Let's talk about your other family. You mentioned your wonderful wife earlier. Just tell us a little bit about anything you'd like to share so that folks can get a feeling for you as more than just a doctor.
Well, about the time Tara and I got here, we decided we were going to start a family. And, you just think that families come easy, but for us it didn't happen. And we went through some work to have a child, went through some fertility things and just didn't work out for us. And so we started looking down the adoption road. And so a few years after I became chief medical officer, we had been working towards an adoption, and there was a little, first, before that, we been working with St. Elizabeth Foundation, which is in Baton Rouge, and we got a call one day when I was practicing before I became chief medical officer that we had an adoption match, which meant jumping on a plane and flying to Vladivostok, Russia, which is far eastern Russia. They call you and say you need to be there in a week and a half, and you drop everything you're doing and find some plane tickets to the middle of nowhere, eastern Russia, and you start this adventure where you go meet somebody that is going to be your son. And so we had Davis, who came from an adoption agency in Baton Rouge, and in fact, he's 16 now. But I was at his birth. His birth mother is still part of our family, sort of, extended family. He's got two sisters from his birth mom that are close. They come to Christmas, and we take dinner with them. And then, and then we have Charles Lawton, who's now 13 years old and seventh grade, and here, and comes from Vladivostok, Russia. But his last experience is there when we were 19, where he was 19 months old. So
two teenagers in the house, and two teenagers, pandemic. Wow, you have nothing on your plate, no stress in your life these days, right?
They're good kids, though. They easy
Yeah.
be a parent to. Lawton and Davis both have their challenges like any
Yeah,
couple
yeah.
does,
Well, I
but
can relate. I have
they're
two
great
boys that are
kids.
2 years apart, and they spend every day scrapping. And I just hope that they make up by the end of the day and go to bed,
Yeah.
with at most bruises and no hard feelings.
A little wrestling in the pool. They not fighters to each other. Never have been. And you know, uh, Davis's birth family was a little small. We found out that Lawton's birth dad was like 6'11".
Oh
So
my
Lawton
God!
might end up being
Wow.
super tall. We'll have to find out.
Whoa, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. My dad was adopted out of an orphanage in New Orleans, as was his brother, and it's just always been a really special topic to me because our family wouldn't be around if not for that. So thank you for sharing that. I know that that's neat and personal. And speaking of that, we've got somebody here says
Yeah.
that she remembers that call. How cool is that?
Yeah, she was working for me in the front office when I remember Tara calling me all teared up, saying we got to mash and we got to be in Russia in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, she says here
Yeah,
in a separate comment that she's worked with you for years. Another really nice comment has come in from our friend Mark Verbois, who I know has seen a lot of North Oaks in action through Leadership Tangent Baho and other programs. But he says here, and Doc, I read these often because I don't always know how big the screen is you're looking at, so forgive me if I already read it. But Mark's impressed with Dr. Peltier, the CEO of the hospital, Michelle Sutton, and the rest of their team, especially how they've handled a stressful pandemic. And anyway, you can see here that he's proud to have y'all and the other staff taking care of our community and citizens. Mark, thank you for chiming in. That's really a kind comment, and I couldn't agree more. Doctor, you guys do so much for us. I can't imagine how exhausting the last few years have been. Can you tell us about what's it been like in this during this pandemic? How have things changed, and what have you learned along the way?
yeah. Oh, well, God, learned so much. Learned a lot about medicine, about myself, about the team we have here. The first part of that pandemic scared the hell out of all of us. We weren't sure
I
what we were
bet.
dealing with. Nobody knew how it was transmitted. Nobody knew how deadly it was. Nobody knew the right treatments for us. Some of the treatments that we had for the first SARS ended up not working for the second one, and we had shortages of PPE, and everybody's looking to you because everybody's scared. And we all put on our best face and did what we could and made decisions. At the same time, a lot of us, I'm sure, including myself, went home and had a glass of wine and a good cry sometimes to try to figure out
I bet.
how do you how do you deal with all of these things. And but it also like I said, it taught you a lot about yourself and what you can do. And then we started having a second wave, which we kind of
Hmm.
expected that one to come after things got a little better, because remember, we had a shutdown.
Right.
Everything was quick, and we were having to make decisions as numbers went up. We put together a second intensive care unit for the surge. For the first couple of ones we didn't need to use, but we started prepping, not knowing how bad things would get. And we had team meetings every single day, 7 days a week at 7:30, that we'd all get, and we'd have discussions about the problem of the day, and what we were anticipating, where we go. I try to do my best to predict based on all the websites that were out there about what we could expect. And we dealt with nursing shortages and equipment shortages, and trying to come up with ideas when you were running out of a medication. There were so many things that you tried to figure out, and you certainly could never make everybody happy, but you were trying to make people feel good, and at the same time, make sure you were taking care of the needs of some really sick people.
Right.
And then, it seemed like things got better. And so that was after that summer of last year. And we all of a sudden started having the vaccines look like they were on the horizon. And
Hmm.
December comes out, we all get vaccines. And I think all of us were hoping that we get them in. And there was demand. So, gosh, we with the help of Mike Watkins and Salita, and we had so many people that got the vaccine clinics going. We did a lot of mass vaccinations. It takes, people volunteering their weekends and times to come in to help to get all those people vaccinated. And we really thought that we had gotten over a hump because we had that third wave in January, February. We really got
Right.
because that was before we had significant immunity among the community. Vaccines were scarce, and you had certain age groups that were getting it. And then things got better about the same time the demand for shots went away.
Uh-huh.
So, that was bad timing here in Louisiana because we had really April, May, and June where our numbers went down to historic lows, and we were hoping that all those vaccines had got in time. But this past, since early July, those numbers have just been rising, and God, it was so depressing to so many people because we felt like we were past it, and those days of super high numbers, like we said. But we've been about 50% higher than our highest peak in February. So where
Oh,
we,
wow.
yeah,
So not just a little higher. And
no,
it seems like, right, I didn't read the national media stuff closely, but I recall seeing that we were either the highest or among the highest parishes, counties in the country. Is that true?
yeah. Listen, for many weeks on end, if you looked on the New York Times page, they had a COVID page where they listed the counties, or parishes
Right.
in the United States. Tangipahoa was either number one or number two for a week and a half straight, and then they kind of bounced back in the top 10 and that's we've got 64 parishes in Louisiana. This is every parish in all 50 states, including the District of Columbia.
Yeah. Wow.
So
That's
Tangipahoa Parish
terrifying.
is near the top, and here at North Oaks, our highest number of patients we ever had in the third wave, which was our highest, was 68 people in house. We had 109 just a week and a half ago.
Oh, wow. So where do we stand today?
Today we started off the day at about 91. Now that's a little bit of a false number because it's a little bit higher. That's the number we report to the state. So we certainly
Mhm.
have 91 COVID patients this morning in. But what we also have is a number of patients, probably a handful, 4 or 5, that have COVID, but they've been here so long that they pulled out of isolation. So those are not ones we report, but certainly people that are still sick here. So for
Right.
example, I have a couple in the intensive care unit that have been here 25, 26 days. We've been able to pull them out of isolation, but they are
Mhm.
still requiring intensive care unit level of service.
Wow.
And so it's been so busy. We've gone back to picking the surgeries that need to be done because I just
Right.
don't have the personnel they're all redeployed. We take our
You
same day
mentioned a
surgery
nursing
people.
shortage. Do we still have a nursing shortage?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
I guess it's tough to get folks to sign up right now. And I mean, it's a tough
yeah,
recruiting pitch.
a little bit, but the nursing shortages are a relative thing.
Mhm.
We have enough nurses when we're not having a surge of COVID in our area.
Right.
Um, you know, Hospitals don't staff for 100% capacity all the time. We staff with regular staff members, like all hospitals do. And I make up a number,
Right.
about 80% full, just like
Yeah.
any airplane or any other
Sure.
business
Yeah.
does. And
Of
whenever
course.
you get more people, you have a pool of people out there that you pull from,
Right.
and it supplements your workforce.
Yeah.
Well, that's the problem that's going on here in Louisiana is that it's fine when one or two hospitals have a little bit of a surge, but when everybody across the entire southeast of Louisiana,
Mhm.
actually the whole state is all full, there's
Right.
no nurses, there's no pool nurses.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
Well, let's talk about the community. What can we do? Because I think so many of us have somewhat lost track of who to trust. If you flip on the TV, Fox News tells you one thing, CNN tells you another. You mentioned the New York Times. We seem to be getting information from all these different places. Frankly, many of them not medical doctors. So now that we have a show here with somebody we can trust, a local doctor that's been in this community for decades, studied infectious diseases as far away as Peru, share with the community, if you would, some advice you have for what we can do to try to make things better.
Yeah, it's not a single thing. And I think people ask this question all the time. They always have a question about masks or about vaccines or the things. It's all of it. And
Mhm.
it is, I think everybody seems to have become somewhat of an expert on,
Right.
and I'm not trying to be sarcastic there from
Right.
that standpoint.
Wait, you mean
On
Google doesn't equal your medical degree?
No, no, that's not even what I'm referring to. I'm kind of going down the line of I think it's we've been dealing with it for 19 months.
Yeah.
So people understood at the beginning. I was teaching what is social distancing, why does it work, what does
Right.
6 feet have to do with 7 feet, and those kind of things, and reminding everybody about how big a circle is, and every
Mhm.
it's a cube when you're talking about to the third power when you're talking about every time it goes out. The mathematics of it, those everybody's got. I think everybody understands the things that we do to reduce transmission among disease. We saw almost no flu this year because
Right.
and last year because everybody was wearing masks and
We
doing
were
the.
washing our hands for a change, right?
That's right. People,
I gotta admit, I never went 20 seconds until the pandemic came. Yeah, I should be embarrassed. My mama deserved. She raised me better, folks. But
Everybody was the same. We all went to the bathroom. I mean, all the guys go to the bathroom. We saw, people
yeah,
sometimes use soap, sometimes not, but nobody scrubbed like you should. I mean, and
right,
listen,
right.
it certainly is the proper way to do it, and you still see that. But with time, people want to go back to their old lives. They want to go back, and I understand the frustration. I understand,
Sure.
um, you know, um, I don't like wearing a mask either. I don't like the fact that, whenever we think about, we used to, on the drop of a hat, just say, hey, let's go run out and have dinner. Now we kind of think about, is that the right thing to do in this time? Should we just go pick up some dinner and bring it home?
Right.
We're trying to support all the local businesses. I know my son today sent me a picture of this big cheeseburger from Pappy's, which I haven't been to yet in Ponchatoula.
Oh, look, I live 2 blocks from Pappy's. That's on my
Yeah,
street. Yeah, they know they do it
big
right.
old hunk of
The
meat.
owners were on our show. Great
Yeah,
food.
yeah, big old hunk of meat and bacon, and but you start thinking about those things and you realize that you have to contribute something. It's all of
Right.
our responsibility to, do we all, it's not fair to have some people go all the way and try to stay home as much as they can and not, wear their mask and wash their hands, and other people, you know, going to big, huge gatherings and having problems. So, I would
Good
still
point.
say getting back to the basics is what we need to do. Now,
Mhm.
the difference between last year and doing all that stuff and this year is there's another option, and that's vaccines.
Yeah,
And
tell us about that. What are your thoughts on
yeah,
vaccines?
so vaccines have been around. They were the cure for smallpox. I mean, people don't know, but the first vaccines really were somebody realizing that people that milked cows didn't get smallpox, and somebody looked over at cows and realized that cows got cowpox. Took some cowpox and kind of scraped it into their skin or other people's skin,
Mhm.
and figured out that that was a way to inoculate people. So that technology has been around for a long time of kind
Yeah.
of mimicking stuff, and so it was unfortunate that and fortunate that we had mRNA vaccines come out because they can be produced so quickly and targeted so well. But because they were new technology, it made people kind of take a breath and go, is this technology safer? It left some questions, which, by now I hope people realize that those things have been around so, we've given so many millions of doses, 300 almost 50 million doses in the United States. We know if they had problems associated with it. Nobody can tell you what any medication or vaccine or anything is going to potentially have a side effect 50 years down the line or 20 years down the line or 10
Right.
years down the line. But they also can't tell you that it won't protect you from something 10 years down the line. So I think at this point, there was a lot of frustration among a lot of my healthcare providers, a lot of my docs. By the way, for anybody that's wondering, the physicians, and I was on a call the other day with physicians from all over the North Shore, all the chief medical officers from all the hospitals, and across the board, 90+% of all the physicians are vaccinated.
Oh,
So
wow.
those are your people. Listen, now, do I have some people in the physician community too that are a little hesitant? Absolutely, but I can tell you 90%, and that's the highest among almost any
I
profession.
bet you don't see doctors agree at 90% on much. Is that fair to say?
Not in any one of my meetings. So that should tell somebody something. And so
Right.
there became a frustration from a lot of my docs and stuff because you know we got into the profession because we care about people.
Of course.
And I look at people that pass away that are unvaccinated as a potential preventable death.
Right.
No different than I would say, wear your helmet if you ride in an ATV, and take your
Right.
blood pressure medicines and those kind of things. And I would tell them that, in the same way I want you to take your blood pressure medicine, I want you to take your vaccine,
Mm-hmm.
because it may do more than just protect you. And it really, um, I don't know. I've seen a lot of guilt out there from people that are wondering if they were the ones that brought it home and the mom and dad.
Right.
They were the ones, and now especially the fact that they have a vaccine, that's out there that maybe could have prevented that. That's really a way, besides all the other things that we can do, the little things to try to avoid spread of the virus, to prevent a fifth wave. At this
Mm-hmm.
point, people that get vaccinated today are really 6 weeks before they have maximum protection. So I got my fingers crossed. I pray that 6 weeks from now, we have a wave that's going down. We're not dealing with these numbers, because
Yeah.
my people here are getting, it's exhausting to do all the extra shifts,
I bet.
to give up your family time and all that stuff. It gets old, and it gets old
Yeah.
real quick. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, they had to be exhausted, many months ago, right? Last year, probably exhausted, but at this point,
yeah,
exhaustion probably meets frustration,
yeah.
and the patience is probably wearing thin. Doctor, it just dawned on me that I've kept you a little bit past the half-hour mark. Folks, Dr. Peltier's time is frankly more valuable than our average guest, because he is running a hospital in a pandemic. So I'd like to let him get out of here so that he can get back to his job, his family, etc. But before you go, doctor, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our viewers? Anything on your
Yeah.
mind, on your heart, etc.?
Yeah, listen, when it comes to vaccines and all those things, you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of information that people are getting from various sources. I've put this out on Johnny's radio show, on all the talks that I do. Send me a question. info@northoaks.org. They have somebody that looks at all of those emails, because there's all kinds of stuff that people want, and sends all those questions to me. I have yet to not answer a question. I can't promise, depending on what my day is, but usually by the end of the day or early the next morning, I get a lot of work done when I get up at 4 or 5 in the morning, because nobody bothers me too much. I make my rounds over here, figure out what surgeries we can do, and I usually have about 45 minutes. And I try to answer those questions, because everybody does have a different question about what it is that's bothering them, what question they need answered. They read stuff, they hear stuff from their friends. When it's opinion, I'll tell people it's opinion. When it's fact, I'll try to point them to the facts that are out there. When it's in my opinion, bad information, I will let them know that there is zero science behind that, and what I feel about it too. But I'm glad to answer those questions for people, because I think that is, sometimes you get down to the only way you advance stuff is not with uh, big groups, but by one-on-one, really getting to the
Right.
heart of what it is that's arising the fear from them, and helping them work through it. I have not yet told somebody that that you're not smart for getting a vaccine. I want everybody to make the decision that's right for them, but they need the right information. And sometimes it means spending a little time with them to think about the other side of things. I think one of my best attributes is being able to see the other side of things. And
Right.
I point out a lot of times with vaccines, I guess that question that, hey, we don't know the long-term side effects of it. I always point out, well, getting the vaccine has risk. But have you thought about the risk of not getting the vaccine? Have you balanced those two things fairly and
Great
really
point.
know what your risk of COVID is or your risk of bringing it home to someone else is? Because neither options are good. Both of them carry risk. There's not they're absolute. This is the option that you're going to be safe because listen, we've given millions of vaccines in Louisiana. We've had 8 people that have anaphylactic reactions. All of them have done well, but I can't ever say to somebody, there's no way that's going to be you.
Right. Right.
It just isn't. Everything we do in medicine, when we consent somebody for a procedure, I need to tell them all the things that can go wrong. But one of the things I also have to do is tell them, if you don't have this procedure, what do you risk?
Sure. Sure.
So that we balance those things, because everybody hears those commercials on the evening news. One of the few things I always watch is the evening news. They have all those questions, and by the time they finish any drug commercial, everybody goes, I don't ever want that, because they tell you about all the side effects.
Right. Right.
But you got to remember that your doctor is trying to give it to you because he's weighed those side effects, and he should go over those with you and realize that your benefit compared to the small risk of a side effect is just better off for you. So it's all a balance of risk. That's all it is.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank you for sharing this information in such a respectful way, because there's no condescension at all in this advice you're giving us. You're not, like you said, you're not telling anybody they're stupid or ignorant, and you're not talking down to us. I think you're just trying to help us understand better things that you're an expert in, but that we're not, frankly. Yeah. So I want to close, folks, with a quote, a comment here from Tanya McLean. She says, "Thank you, Dr. P. Dr. Peltier, thank you not only for coming on the show, for staying 11 minutes longer than we told you would need to, but for sharing for all this information, but especially thank you for serving our community. You and your brothers and sisters in arms at North Oaks do a great job for this community, and we're very fortunate to have you right here in our backyard. We were talking before we came on the show where you sit in your office is technically Hammond, but you're right next to the city limits of Ponchatoula, right next door. Belle Maison is in Ponchatoula. So, this is truly our community hospital, even though it might be located 150 feet from the city limits or whatever.
Took me a long time when I first got here to understand that everybody, when I first started practice, wanted to know, well, are you in Ponchatoula or Hammond? And I didn't even know where the line was. And people wanted to know where I put my flag in the ground. So
it's tricky. In the old days, like when my dad was coming up, it was the creek, one side of the creek. But these days, boy, those cities have gotten smart and they've gerrymandered that Veterans Highway, and it's really hard to tell which city's got what turf at this point. But once again, thank you so much, folks. Those of you who are still tuned in, we thank you for staying with us. And I'll put this email address up once more. As Dr. Peltier said, if you have questions, email them. It's info@northoaks.org. Make informed decisions, and hopefully you'll make the right one. And we thank you, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.